Hello gamers, what is going on? I am running on 5 hours sleep, 2 cups of coffee, and a dream, but I refuse to let recording this video be pushed back any further because I have been sitting on it for a very long time. We're talking about icebergs today, specifically a Monster Hunter iceberg, and if you don't know what an iceberg is, it's pretty much just a deep dive on a particular topic, starting at the top with theories and things that people know a lot about, and slowly working your way down the tier until you get to things that nobody has any idea about whatsoever. Even me in some circumstances, but we'll get there, just hang in there. There are a few Monster Hunter icebergs floating around out there, but the one we're using today was originally posted by Randizer Draken 3 years ago on the Monster Hunter Reddit. It was the most reasonably sized one I could find without being too small or too big. There is one that would take hours, the video would be hours long, which we can dive into if you guys really want me to, but it's going to take a little while. And if there's a more recent one, please let me know, and I'll dive into that one as well. So, we've got a lot of things to go through today, a lot of different Monster Hunter topics, a lot of tiers with a lot of entries, so we're just going to get into it, I think. Sound good? Good. Alright, let's do it. The Monster Hunter Iceberg, starting with Tier 1, and our first entry is... To kick things off, we have a classic in the new age of Monster Hunter, and a great example of how some theories are just fun and spread like wildfire once they start. Sharish Valda looks at the player, or more accurately, the camera. This is a theory that Sharish Valda was programmed and designed to have its eyes sort of always looking directly at you, the player, the real life person. Whilst it's fun and imaginative, I am almost certain it isn't actually the case. In fact, I recall a recent thread that had a breakdown of how Sharish Valda's model works and how it was designed, and it allows for that sort of optical illusion to take place. It's still a fun idea though. I really like it, and it's a totally harmless one, so keep on keeping on with it. This is pretty explicitly said in World. Nergigante's whole thing is that he comes through and he takes out any excess Elder Dragons that make it across in the Elder Crossing, and he brings balance to the Force, or ecology or something. That's pretty much it. Alright, we're going to put these next two together, the Lagiacrus skeleton issues and the prototype Ancient Forest, because they go kind of hand in hand, I'd say, because without one, most people probably would not have even questioned the other one. The prototype Ancient Forest was shown to us in a video shortly after World's release, and it gives us an early concept of an Anjanath just relentlessly chasing a hunter through the forest. A lot of these concepts remain in the final game, but there is even more emphasis on this sort of evading and getting away from the monster than we eventually got in the final product. At the end of the video, those who have seen it will remember that the hunter and the Anjanath plummet down the waterfall, and the Anjanath is just promptly, absolutely destroyed by a Lagiacrus, which shows us that Lagiacrus was fully intended to be in the final game. However, you may notice that it's not even in Iceborne, it's not there at all. And that's where the Lagiacrus skeleton issues come in. It was stated by the devs prior to Sunbreak coming out, Monster Hunter Rise's expansion, that the issue was that the monsters, specifically the really large, really low to the ground Leviathans, are too big, too long, and always have a part of their body dragging along the ground, that it's just a physics nightmare to try and accurately animate them and get them to work within the Monster Hunter physics engine. I hope that they fix this in the future, because they got things like Almudron and Mizutsune working pretty well, so, I don't know, just make Lagiacrus more upright, I think is the solution. But anyway, moving on. This is the third, or technically the fourth entry in the Portable Monster Hunter series, and was only ever released in Japan, unfortunately. Despite that, it does remain a fan favorite, and somehow managed to be the third best-selling PlayStation Portable game of all time, worldwide, which is just crazy. It's also the first time we see Series Golden Child and everybody's favorite wolf dragon, Sonoga, along with a few other monsters you're probably familiar with, like Arzuros, Nibblesnarf, and Amatsu. Fun fact, this is the only game I've ever imported to play, despite the fact that I don't know a lick of Japanese. Alright, we're into Tier 2. All of these are still going to be pretty well known, I think, and we'll start with a good one, Monster Hunter Frontier. Monster Hunter Frontier was truly the MMO RPG Monster Hunter game of your dreams. It was built upon the Monster Hunter DOS engine, only available in a handful of countries in Asia, and its servers ran from 2007 through till 2019 when it was unfortunately shut down. Not to be deterred though, the fandom has ensured that it continues to this day, and as such, it does remain playable. It featured a staggeringly high amount of monsters and even several unique weapons, most of which have never and may never be seen ever again, unfortunately. Espinas did make it out of Monster Hunter Frontier though, so who's to say what we'll see in the future. Monster Hunter Online was MMO number 2 for the series. It released only in China, and it ran from 2013 through till 2019. It was developed on the Crytek engine, and so was our first look at Monster Hunter with fancy graphics. Boasting its own slew of unique monsters, it was a shake-up for the series for sure, but didn't quite have the staying power that Frontier did. Dundorma is the main town in the online portion of Monster Hunter DOS and reappears in the latter half of Monster Hunter 4U, if you'll remember. It also features as a quest location known as The Town in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite and is just always getting completely annihilated by Elder Dragons. I don't know why you'd live there. Why this is up for debate. It could be that it's near Castle Shrade, which is where Fatalis is supposed to be. It could just be that it's in a really bad location, like how some people live under flight paths in the real world. I don't know why people live in Dundorma. There is way more on the wiki about the ancient civilization than I thought there would be, and I honestly don't know if it's fanfiction or confirmed canon, but I'm rolling with it. I'm gonna go with it. Long story short, there is evidence throughout the Monster Hunter lore that a long-ass time ago, a civilization existed that was more advanced than the current civilization in the Monster Hunter universe that we, the players, see. For the most part. The main evidence is there's ruins everywhere. They can be found throughout various maps, particularly the Tower and the Forlorn Arena. The people of this ancient culture had a close connection with monsters that resulted in them utilizing them for different means, and they weren't necessarily good means, I'm afraid. We'll come back to this topic a few times in this iceberg as we get deeper and deeper, but TLDR, they pulled an Icarus, flew too close to the sun, and made some bad decisions, which resulted in the civilization collapsing. Which, damn, if that isn't ironic to what's going on right now in the real world. Monster Hunter Explore was a mobile game released only in Japan and Canada for some reason. It was active from 2015 till 2020 before the service was shut down. It featured like every single monster ever and saw the player traveling to a wide array of islands to hunt them. It also had an absolutely bonkers amount of crossover quests. We're talking things like Evangelion Brachydios, Attack on Titan Deviljho. Yeah, if you've seen them and ones like them, they came from Monster Hunter Explore. Yeah. Alright, time to do some time traveling. Way back in 2006, Monster Hunter 2 came out as, you guessed it, a Japanese exclusive, unfortunately, and it brought with it a bunch of new features. One such feature, which we haven't seen since, was the Versus mode, where two hunters would each bring a monster into the arena, and the goal was to successfully defeat the enemy's monster before they defeated yours. Pretty cool concept, I'd say. You could name the monsters and send them into a rage mode with a horn and do all kinds of things like that. It was pretty neat, and it'd be a fun thing to see come back at some point, but I guess they kind of already did that with Monster Hunter Stories, so maybe we will not see this ever again. Yeah. Blangonga was an ice monkey from the second generation that was sorta like a discount Rajang, and Copper Blangonga was its subspecies introduced in Freedom Unite. That was instead in the desert as opposed to the snowy mountains. Copper Blangonga was special because it was the first subspecies we got that actively changed the ecology, element, and location you can fight the monster in. Whereas all the previous ones would basically just be a color change, and they make the monster a bit more powerful, and that's it. Old subspecies was sort of more like variants, I would say, that we see today. Yeah. Alright, tier 3, baby. We're starting to get into the weeds of it. Starting with the unknown black flying wyvern. This thing is an absolutely bonkers monster that was exclusive to Frontier. Visually, it was very similar to a Rathalos or a Rathian, but it was anything but those things as far as I can tell. This thing has 5 different rage states that gradually increase as you damage it, a near invulnerability to all status effects, and even 2 additional forms, known as Supremacy Unknown and Solstice War Unknown. Holy shit. This is certainly a flying wyvern well and truly on par with Elder Dragons, to the point that it can actually be repelled, much like Elder Dragons can be in the earlier games. So, yeah, seems pretty gnarly. Wyvern Rex is taken from a few concept art pieces in one of the earlier art books, and is said to be the ancestral monster to all wyverns. Every wyvern that exists currently in the Monster Hunter world is it comes from Wyvern Rex at some point in its evolutionary history. Visually, it's very reminiscent of Tigrex, which is intentional and shows that Wyverns evolved from being four-legged to two-legged rather than the other way around. It has dark scales and also almost reminds you of a Fatalis, to be honest, when you look at it real close. The Feline Village games are the Dark Souls of Monster Hunter, and I mean that in the sense that they were made by From Software. They feature the titular feline running around and clobbering monsters in a cutesy style with rhythm game controls. They were PSP exclusives and also exclusive to Japan, like half of the games in this entire series. The theory here is that the white Kazoo that we see far more frequently are actually the subspecies of the monster, being white due to a common genetic defect, whilst the red Kazoo are actually normal Kazoo. That's what they actually look like. A neat little bit of ecology, I suppose. It's still considered the subspecies though, because they are much more reclusive and thus far less common. This one is a pretty basic fan theory, and it is that the Yangaruga is a crossbreed between a Kutku and a Rathian, and arises from the fact that it basically, mechanically, is a mix of those two monsters. It looks and behaves like a Kutku, but it attacks like a Rathian. Nothing more than fans having a bit of fun with some fan theories. Pretty harmless and pretty fun, I'd say. I would have thought that this one would be a little bit higher on the list because I thought this was pretty common knowledge. But yeah, the majority of the monsters that you find in Monster Hunter Rise, or at least in the base game, I'd say, are based on Japanese folklore, specifically yokai. I think this design motif lends the monsters a much more coherent feel across the entire game, and it makes them a bit more mysterious as well. As far as examples go, Azuchi is supposed to be the Kama Itachi, which is a weasel-like creature with blades for hands that lives in dust devils. Aknosom is based on the living umbrella yokai Kasabake, and my personal favorite, Gosarag, is based on the Namahage, with a bit of Oni influence going on in there as well. Oh boy, now we are getting into it. You want to talk about some war crimes and atrocities? Does that sound like fun? The Equal Dragon Weapon is an artificial dragon created by the ancient civilization that is stitched together corpses of elder dragons. They're bolted together by a metal shell that keeps them all as one, and it's intended to be a weapon, a super soldier to be used against the monsters themselves. Yeah, it's pretty gnarly and pretty dark for Monster Hunter. This is said to be the thing that began the Great Dragon War that ultimately resulted in the ancient civilization being just utterly annihilated and destroyed. All of this is pretty neat, but a little grim for our jovial little Monster Hunter series, and so it's worth noting that it's all just pulled from early concept work for the original Monster Hunter game, and it never made it past that phase. As such, this is not considered canon, something I am personally thankful for, but many are disappointed by. I don't know why. It doesn't fit the vibe, I feel. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're on to Tier 4, and now we're getting into the dark web of Monster Hunter just a little bit. The most I could find about the Hellfire Jagras was a mod for Monster Hunter World that took our pal, the Great Jagras, and turned him into a demon from the deepest pits of hell. Yeah, it's big, it's on fire, it's fast, and that's about it. It does have some pretty solid texture work, I'd say. Looks pretty cool, but that's all I got. That's all I've got on it. I don't know if there's a deeper meaning. I don't know. Now onto a legitimate monster variation, all the way from the previously mentioned Monster Hunter Explore. Destruction Wyvern Rathalos is a neon blue and black special species of Rathalos that looks almost nothing like a Rathalos, apart from the fact that it's a flying wyvern, I'd say. It shoots laser beams from the sky, but otherwise apparently behaves very much like a Rathalos, so, yeah. Oh, and for the weebs among us, this is a crossover monster with Fairy Tail. Never read Fairy Tail or watched it, but there you go. Another one that I thought was pretty common knowledge, Curse Fatalis armor. Read just about any Fatalis armor description, and you will immediately see that the Fatalis armor kind of fucks you up. Some examples are, the instant it is worn, the lust for darkness reigns. The longer you use it, the more you feel the armor's spirit take control of you. Those who wear it are said to have terrible nightmares. And leg armor that makes it feel as if both your legs are being constantly seized by Fatalis itself. Yeah. I think this one came about because in-game you can hunt things like Xeno'jiiva over and over again, despite it supposedly being this unique occurrence of a monster that comes once in a lifetime, and the same goes for like Sharish Valda, supposedly being the one and only Everworm, but you can farm it for its skin as much as you like. Ultimately, it's just an example of the necessity to be able to play the game and making concessions in the lore and the story of the game, I'd say. Nothing too crazy about reviving. Though I think the Dia Moralis can revive itself from its beating heart, which is crazy. Back to the ancient civilization, baby. The tower in question here is the main one we see as one of the maps that you constantly verse Elder Dragons at throughout the series, and can be seen in the background of the Forlorn Arena. The people of the ancient civilization supposedly use monster materials to make all of their structures and all of their buildings, and it's said that the tower itself is made out of Elder Dragons such as Kushala Daora, because it's got steel scales, you see. This is obviously not a great thing, because think about how many monsters you need to slay to just make yourself a set of armor and a weapon. Now, multiply that number by like 1 billion, and you get a whole tower. Yeah, the Elder Dragons probably weren't very happy about that one. The Tale of the Five is an in-game book you can find in your room in Monster Hunter World, and it tells the story of a creation myth depicting a group of people and 5 dragons before the world existed. You can go and read the full thing for yourself if you like, but ultimately it tells us that these dragons created the sky and the sea with their breath, and each of them became an element of the world we live in. One became the land, one became the mountains, one became the lakes and the rain, and one became the forests, and the last ascended into the sky and became the Sapphire Star. We'll come back to the Sapphire Star in just a bit. Julius was first introduced as the Ace Commander in Monster Hunter 4, and he is the leader of the Ace Hunters. He was then given more lore and a name in that Monster Hunter movie that was on Netflix that came out and wasn't the awful live-action one. He is the teacher of Aiden, otherwise known as the Ace Cadet or the Excitable A-Lister, and is a cool and stoic badass and all that good stuff. He's cool. I mean, look at this man. He was clearly designed to mirror a Rajang. He even goes toe-to-toe with one with no weapon and just a rock. So, yeah, the dude is a Rajang. Yeah, moving on. This one refers to the fact that during the Safijiva fight, you can see multiple Xenojiva eggs and cocoons in the backgrounds of the secluded valley, implying that there could be more Xenojiva out there outside of the one that we slayed, and this one that became Safijiva. Pretty straightforward. This one is fun headcanon that I can get behind. In the opening cutscene of Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, we see a hunter getting prepared to hunt a Nagakuga. We get a little montage of his armor being made, and he puts it on, and would you look at that, it just so happens to be the old school Rathian armor. The same armor that the huntsman wears in Monster Hunter World. You could obviously point out that this hunter then proceeds to grab a greatsword and not a longsword, but I choose to believe this one, because it's just fun to do so. Alright, okay ladies and gentlemen, we are past the halfway point. First things first, obscure weapons, starting with the Axel Axe. This one's a pretty neat one that was only ever in Monster Hunter Explore and can only be described as a rocket-propelled great axe. It is very cool. It is as cool as it sounds, and awesome, and very cool and sick. But unfortunately, I don't like our chances of ever seeing this in a mainline game. Next up is, of course, the Tonfa. This one was exclusive to Monster Hunter Frontier, and it's a pretty iconic weapon in its own right. They are the closest thing the series has to a fist weapon, and they are fast, mobile impact weapons that allow the hunter to jump and do flips and shit, Attack on Titan style. As if that wasn't enough, it also has 2 different modes, long and short mode. Long mode has normal hit zone damage, and short mode has inverted hit zone damage, so what used to be a monster's toughest part is now its weakest part, and vice versa. I would personally love to see these in the mainline series, and I think out of the obscure weapons, it's probably the most likely to do so, but we'll have to wait and see. And our third and final obscure weapon is the Magnet Spike. One of the few examples of the melee weapons dealing both impact and slashing damage, the Magnet Spike is massive. It's a gigantic weapon, but it can move pretty quickly because it manipulates magnetic fields to allow the hunter to dash in and out of combat. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It lets you stick a magnet to a monster and switch between attraction and repulsion to dash forward and away from them. Probably the most out there weapon, and since we have yet to see any magnetism in the mainline series, I think it's unlikely that we see this weapon again, particularly anytime soon, but it would still be cool to do so. I don't know what this one means. I guess it's just as it sounds. White Fatales kills the player, but I could not find anything on the topic. So, yeah, I guess a headcanon for the fact that if you're facing a White Fatalis, you're already dead. Yeah, sounds about right. This one refers to the idea that in Monster Hunter World, there was more dev time spent on the Ancient Forest and the Wildspire Waste compared to the other maps like the Coral Highlands, the Rotten Vale, and the Elder's Recess. Whilst I couldn't find anything solid that backs up the claim, there's a few things that come to mind that could back it up, I think. The first two maps feel more complex, first of all. They have more camps, they flow better, and they loop in on themselves much more consistently, and they lead to a smoother gameplay feel, I think. Maybe I'm crazy. They also feature more in-depth terrain hazards, with the Ancient Forest having the falling rocks that are in the vines, the waterfall at the top of the wyvern nest, and the vines that the monsters can fall through, and the Wildspire has the pretty famous sinkhole that the Diablost likes to explode through. So, yeah, I can see where this one comes from. I don't know if it's necessarily the case, but I wouldn't be surprised. Let's just say that. I was either not aware of this or had completely forgotten about it, and no, it's not just talking about a bulldrome. In Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, there's a rare chance that a bullfanger will spawn, and it's just really, really big. Almost bulldrome sized, as if it's a bulldrome in the making. That's cool. That's nice. It's a neat little touch that I appreciate. The Lava Canyon was an arena map that only showed up in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd for the express purpose to fight a Cantor. It's sort of this island inside this gigantic magma cavern with abandoned ruins in the background, and it has not been seen since, like a lot of arena maps, unfortunately. Ghost Caesarba is, I suppose, a variant for the online exclusive monster Caesarba, which is just a giant beaver-looking guy. It differs in that it has blood-soaked hands and a tail and is missing an eye, making for a pretty metal rendition of a monster that is not particularly scary, I don't think, and if the ghost part of the name is to be taken literally, the implications for the series are pretty wild. This one refers to the fact that in Monster Hunter Frontier, years before Monster Hunter World released Safi'jiiva and its weapon mechanics, there was a very similar set of mechanics that already existed. Sky Corridor was a particular map in Monster Hunter Frontier that housed specific materials that could be crafted into a variety of weapons unique to that map. From there, you could give these weapons statuses, elements, affinity boosts, gunner skills, and more. Sound familiar? Because it should. I don't know exactly why this has made it this far down the list, because my assumption is that it's just referring to the Holiday Joy Fest from Monster Hunter World, which I could not find a single bit of controversy surrounding it, so I don't know. I don't know why it's here. It was an event where they decked the Gathering Hall out with cool Chinese New Year themed designs and gave us some neat event armors. Yeah, I don't know why it's at the bottom of tier 5. Alright, editing Ginge here. I found something about a quest that I never actually did, which was a limited event quest that had a hunt for 5 oversized moss swines, 4 big ones, and 1 really, really big one. The moss swine were aggressive, and they one-shot you. I think it was a celebration for Year of the Pig, and that's what this point is referring to. Alright, moving on. This is exactly as it sounds, a list of monsters that leaked prior to Monster Hunter World that were going to be in the base game. To be fair, the list remained pretty accurate to what actually came out in base world, with a few exceptions here and there. Lunastra and Deviljho were on the list, but weren't actually in the base game. They were added in patches later in World's life cycle. Alatreon was also there, but we wouldn't see Alatreon until a later patch of Iceborne, and the Orochi Kirin never made it, which makes it the only monster on the list that never got in at all. Poor Orochi Kirin. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost there. We are getting there. We are up to tier 6, and we're kicking it off with Monster Hunter Orage. Orage is a lesser-known manga about Monster Hunter that ran from 2008 and only had 4 volumes, I'm afraid. Again, for the weebs in here, it is by the guy who made Fairy Tail, and it's an alright read, I think. It's a bit gritty from the Monster Hunter aesthetic, in my opinion, but it does feature some unique monsters that have never turned up anywhere outside the manga at all, so it's worth checking out just for that, I think. All of that said, if you want to read a Monster Hunter manga, just go and read Flash Hunter. It's way better and good and fun and cool. This was a little all over the place in terms of theories I could find, because there's multiple threads that I found that come up with different ideas about this exact thing. Long story short, the idea is that Safi'jiiva lured Alatreon to the New World, specifically the Secluded Valley, to absorb its bioenergy and get big and strong. I don't think Safi'jiiva wins that fight, so I don't know why. Anyway, yeah. This point will be better served by throwing up some pictures on screen, so have a look at some of these gnarly-ass early concepts for Nergigante. I do prefer the final version we got over these, but you got to admit, these are pretty wild and out there, particularly the uncolored one in the bottom right. Yeah, I hope they reuse some of these designs for something at some point. Swapping back to Frontier for a second, Midogaron is a giant wolf monster that is the lone version of a different version of a monster called Kamu Arugaron. Midogaron is unique for several different reasons, but my favorite one is that it will target and single out a hunter that posted the quest in the first place, relentlessly pursuing them until they are dead. I can imagine this caused many an argument on who exactly was going to take the ring to Mordor, so to speak, in those Frontier lobbies, and that sounds like a lot of fun. Another mod monster, Crimson Pale Nergigante, was a custom subspecies for the big guy and is best described by the mod creator as follows. Crimson Pale Nergigante is a subspecies that excels at lightning element and fire element. Its speed surpass far beyond normal Nergigante and is able to manipulate fire and lightning. The roar is so strong and also very hot that causes you to take damage and knock you while your body catch on fire. Cool. This one sort of continues on the ancient civilization stuff that we were talking about earlier. Long story short, the dragons got the shits that the ancient civilization people were butchering their kind, which is fair enough, and using their skin to make stuff, and so they started a war about it. This war was long and super violent, but ended up with many dragons becoming extinct, and the people being entirely wiped out. So, not a great outcome, but we've moved past it now. The best I've got for this one is a quest description from the Monster Hunter World quest, Master of the Gale, that reads as follows. Did you know that some cultures worship Kushala Daora as a god of the wind? Luckily, we're not one of them. I'm determined to study its mastery of flight. Just think of the benefits. And yeah, I think that makes sense. Elder dragons in general tend to have a bit of a higher being aura to them that makes sense that people would worship them, like mythological creatures that exists in mythos today in the real world. I think that makes sense. A classic one, this one is. Truly takes us back to the very beginning. I'm not sure if it's canon, I always thought it was, and I will continue to do so. Lao Shen Lung is a big guy, one of the largest monsters we've ever seen, but it is said that its sudden appearance and assault on the fortress back in the early Monster Hunter days was caused by it being so scared of Fatalis that it just tried to run away and it ran into the town and the fortress, and that's what happened. Woo! Right at the end of tier 6, this one is a deep fucking cut for sure. Basically, if you listen to the battle music for one of the earlier jungles in Monster Hunter, I'm pretty sure it's the second jungle, but I could be wrong, there's a part where the vocals are chanting something or other. This sound was also originally used in the Ocarina of Time Fire Temple soundtrack, and it had its own controversy associated with it because it apparently translates into Muslim prayer in Arabic, which offended some folks. The more you know, huh? Whew! Second to last tier, tier 7, and we're kicking it off with some super sweet concept stuff. I'll just do the Ancient Serpent and the Extinct Species points together, because I think that makes sense. Extinct Species are pretty self-explanatory, monsters that are known to have existed in the Monster Hunter universe at some point, generally via lore or concept art, are confirmed to no longer exist. That's how extinction works. There's several of these that stem mainly from the first and second generation concept art books, one of which is the Ancient Serpent. Whilst considered an extinct species, yes, it is possible that this thing still exists within universe. It's a gigantic Piscine wyvern that has fully lost its wings and legs and wields power comparable to an elder dragon. Just a big fish. Another famous extinct species is the Wyvern Rex that we spoke about just a little bit ago. So yeah, there's quite a few of them. It's pretty cool. Go and look them up if you want to see and learn about that kind of stuff. Whilst not on the extinct species list, the Gaia Dragon is another concept art monster that is pretty well known in the community because it would just be super cool to see it fully realized in game. The idea is that it's a huge elder dragon whose appearance and abilities vary depending on which map you fight it in. It would be an obsidian dragon in the desert, a marsh dragon in the swamps and jungles, or a lava dragon in volcanic maps. The actual design is a little weak by today's standards, but the concept remains strong, I think. This is another one that I was blissfully unaware of before making this video. Zora Magdaros, canonically, has a second pair of arms on its back where its wings should be, that it uses to help hold up its gigantic shell. This picture of it is not nightmare fuel at all. No, sir, not at all. Moving on. Now, please. Thank you. After I googled this prompt, I just ended up watching Max Saw's Monster Hunter World review again, because once you start that video and your senses are just assaulted, you can't turn back. What were we talking about? Oh, right. This one's a bit of a doozy and gets into some rough territory that's just a touch more than I'm comfortable with going into here. But I think the basic idea is that the through line of Monster Hunter World, and in particular Iceborne, is that it's about colonialism and how awesome and good and cool colonialism is. Because we move to the Hoarfrost Reach and we make Celiana there. I get where they're coming from, and colonialism sucks, but like, I don't know, man. I choose to think it's not that deep. But who am I to say the devs' intentions? I don't know them. It'd be cool to know them. Capcom, let me meet your devs. That would be sick. This one sort of piggybacks off the Kushala Daora worship one, but focuses on the black dragons like Fatalis and Alatreon. Apparently, there are cults in the world of Monster Hunter that worship these monsters out of fear of what they may do to the world. Sort of like how real people worship gods out of fear. Yeah, it makes sense. I get it. Whilst Fatalis has been in the series since the very first entry, it was never canonically fought or slain prior to Iceborne. Every single other Fatalis hunt is supposed to be a myth, a legend, or something along those lines. That was until it was woven into the story of Iceborne, and now there has been at least one canon occurrence of a Fatalis being slain. Fuck. And now there is one in-universe canon event of Fatalis being slain at Castle Shrade by the player in Monster Hunter World. And that's it. That's the only time that's happened. Best I can tell, this one refers to the alternate translation for the Bloodbath Dialboss from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. This guy is the secondary flagship for that game and makes up the other half of the Unrivaled 2 alongside Valstrux. It's a G-rank exclusive deviant that can only be fought after defeating every other deviant first, and he kicks ass. Yeah, pretty cool. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Xeno'jiiva looks a lot like an alien, I'd say, and well, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. That's the idea anyway. I'm not saying I agree. I don't really. I think he's just a weird bioenergy dragon, and he looks weird because he's underdeveloped because we interrupted and made him be born early. Yeah, that's my take. This is a cool concept that unfortunately never made it into the final version of World, but apparently there was set to be colossal monsters that would fight each other in the distance of the Elder's Recess and would occasionally pose environmental hazards on the map itself. You can see a few ideas in the concept art for World that shows Lao Shanlung, the Lamadur, and Yamatsukami all chilling in the background of the Elder's Recess. Yeah, I would like to see this explored at some point. This sounds freaking awesome. Alrighty, we're almost there, ladies and gentlemen. We're up to the final tier, Tier 8, which is it. We're just going to go through this and we're done with the Iceberg. It's been a long one, but we're almost through it. The Sapphire Star is part of the tale of the Five and serves as the idea for guidance and hope throughout the entire story of World. This theory doesn't make much sense to me because the Sapphire Star is pretty explicitly a metaphorical thing, I think, and is a title bestowed upon the player, but I think the idea is that Xeno'jiiva, and by extension Safi'jiiva, are the Sapphire Star from the story. Safi'jiiva's ultimate move being called Sapphire of the Emperor is a particular case for this theory, and we fucking wrecked both of those guys. I don't really buy into this one, but it exists nonetheless, and let people have fun with theories, I think is a good way to go. I couldn't even find the concept art for this one, even though I swear I've seen it before. So it's either super duper rare, or I completely made up the image in my head. But long story short, it's like a single piece of early concept that depicted the original area where the feline was supposed to come from. It's essentially a super pure white forest with white trees and all that sort of thing. It's all magical and all that, and yeah, that's the Power Tree Forest. The Crypt Hydra, one of the most infamous pieces of early-ass concept art the series has, I think. The image shows a giant two-headed snake monster covered in bandages emerging from some form of ancient ruin. Gives off very big Gods of Egypt vibes. Whilst this guy never got past the concept phase in this state, it is believed that the idea eventually became Nakakos, which frankly fits much better with the Mon Hun aesthetic, I would say, and works pretty well. An interesting one for sure, and is exactly as it sounds. I haven't played Frontier, unfortunately, but it seems like a pretty out there theory because all of the maps in Frontier that show evidence of the ancient civilization, such as the towers, are all run down and destroyed just like they are in the main series. Still a fun way to think about the divide between this and the mainline games, though. A classic glitch in Monster Hunter Tri, and one of the two out-of-bounds glitches I can think of in Monster Hunter history, the other one being in Freedom Unite's Forest and Hills map. Simply put, if you climb up to the Wyvern Nest area in the deserted island, and then jump off the cliff and fall down into Area 5, another hunter can shoot you just as you enter the area, and you will be thrown out of bounds. This allows you to run around outside the map and run into invisible walls and whatnot, and it's fun to do once or twice to just break the game, you know? For those wondering, and if I recall correctly, the Freedom Unite glitch was very similar. You could go to the Area 5 of Forest and Hills and begin to climb the cliff. About 2 or 3 ledges up, if you small barrel bombed yourself towards the wall, it would throw you out of bounds and allow you to run around and see the map from weird vantage points. Fun times. The only thing I could find on this one was a single comment in the original Reddit post that this iceberg comes from that reads, "What is the upright tree dragon?" with no replies. I would also like to know, Zed Crash, because I have no idea. Someone please enlighten me in the comments down below. Thank you. Well, we started this iceberg with Sharish Valda, so let's finish it with him. I hadn't heard of the term Origin Dragon before this, but apparently it's the suborder that all the Fatalis fall into, according to this post by Monster Hunter lore master Bandino. Anyway, this entry is basically stating that Sharish Valda is a close relative of Fatalis, I suppose, which doesn't really mesh in my mind. I don't get that line. Some of the Shara equipment descriptions do hint at immortality, much like the Fatalis ones, saying things like, hunters become avatars of righteous fury to smite evil, sever souls from sinners, and bring release to the tainted. Pretty metal stuff. The through line here is bringing good, as opposed to the Fatalis being pretty explicitly evil. If not this theory, then the only other thing I can think of is that Sharish Valda is one of the dragons from the Tale of the Five, and if I had to guess which one, I'd probably say the one that's lifted its gaze to the sky and became the mountains. That's the best I got for that theory. A fun one, if nothing else. Whew. That's it, guys. The Monster Hunter Iceberg, complete and very detailed and very good and very awesome. Yeah. That was a hell of a ride. That is a video concept that I have been meaning to make for a very long time, and I'm glad I finally did, and I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to go and check out the Reddit post that comes from. As I said, it was posted on the Monster Hunter Reddit 3 years ago. Just search up Monster Hunter Iceberg and you'll find it. The OP is Randizer Draken, so thank you for putting that together if somehow you see this video. Yeah. And if there is a more recent version of the Iceberg, do let me know. I may have missed it, and for that, I apologize. Thanks for watching the video, guys. It's great to be back. And, yeah, I'll see you on the next one, folks. Hopefully not too far off. Yeah. All right. See ya. And also, oh no, my light died. Ah, she. My light died mid-sing. I need my light. My light died. Oh no, my light died.